South Carolina has named its starting quarterback, or have they? Andrew Lyon, Locked On Gamecocks, joining me here on the show. Is LaNorris Sellers the starting quarterback, Andrew? Is it not going to be Sellers? What's going on here?
Spencer, I think in a roundabout way, LaNorris Sellers is going to be the starting quarterback for South Carolina heading into this upcoming football season. Shane Beamer is currently on his welcome home tour right now, talking to fans all around the Palmetto State here in South Carolina. And, of course, some of the local media stopped by to chat with him a little bit yesterday evening, and that was when the quote kind of came out that LaNorris Sellers is the starting quarterback coming out of spring ball. He made sure to emphasize that he still has to compete and earn those reps and earn that spot throughout fall camp. But, Spencer, let's be honest. No head coach has ever named a starter coming out of spring, I believe, and then gone back against that heading into week 1 or week 0 now of the college football season. So I would say that unless Robbie Ashford just goes crazy bonkers in fall camp or LaNorris Sellers has an injury, then I would say Sellers is indeed the starting quarterback. And I think that obviously could bring a lot of benefits to South Carolina because guys right now know who the top dog is in that quarterback room, allows them to build a rapport with some of the new guys at the wide receiver position. Raheem Rocket Sanders, Arkansas transfer at that running back position. So I think that there's a lot of benefits that come with having a starter named at this very point in time here at South Carolina.
In the quarterback room, I don't think it would be described as one of the best in the SEC going into 2024. And there are some places that have quarterback questions, right? You look at the number of young guys like a Garrett Nussmeier at LSU, just as an example, certainly not the only one. But is this going to be one of the biggest hurdles for South Carolina, you feel? Let's say that it does end up remaining LaNorris Sellers as the starting quarterback for the Gamecocks. How does that set them up in 2024?
Well, I think it does add a bit of a dynamic playmaking ability in the offensive backfield. Again, mentioned Rocket Sanders earlier. Obviously, he's going to help out greatly in that regard. But LaNorris Sellers, he's essentially a quarterback where if you could put one together in a factory and spin him out, that would be the kind of quarterback you would want. A cannon of an arm, can throw it 60-plus yards down the field, probably has about 4.6, 4.55 speed in terms of 40-yard dash time for a guy that's like 6'3", 240 pounds. LaNorris Sellers, I mean, in terms of just size and overall athleticism, he's pretty similar to a KJ Jefferson that we've seen at Arkansas over the past few years, now, of course, at Central Florida. So South Carolina, they need LaNorris Sellers to kind of be the man early and often. They have a couple really tough games early on in their schedule. They play at Kentucky in week 2. That's the first SEC game of this upcoming college football season. Then they go back home and they play LSU. So South Carolina, in a year where they really need to make it back to a bowl game, Shane Beamer, I think, needs to hit a certain win total to make sure that he keeps his job for this next season. A lot of pressure is going to be on LaNorris Sellers' shoulders to be a big reason why the Gamecocks have success early and often this fall.
South Carolina's win total, according to our friends at FanDuel, is 5.5. With LaNorris Sellers starting at quarterback, can they go over that number?
I believe they can. If you look at South Carolina's schedule, they've got certain opponents like Wofford and Old Dominion. They've got Vanderbilt. They've got, I think, 4 guaranteed wins looking at their schedule. But I think after that, South Carolina's in a situation where you kind of got a lot of toss-up games. You got to find 2 more wins on the schedule. Certainly, they could knock that out right off the bat with Kentucky and LSU. I think those are 2 winnable games. Kentucky breaking in a new quarterback in Brock Vandagriff, and LSU losing a lot of firepower on offense, losing their offensive coordinator. And it's early in the season, Williams-Brice Stadium, so anything can happen. But I think if you are the Gamecocks, having LaNorris Sellers starting at quarterback, it does give you a much better shot of crossing that 5.5 win total set by FanDuel and making it back to the postseason.
Could he face LaNorris Sellers, that is, any sort of pressure from Robbie Ashford, who's been a journeyman in college football? He began his career at Oregon. He was at Auburn last year. He played some. He mostly runs at the quarterback position. He hasn't really, developed that much as a passer. Is there any pressure there? Do you think when fall camp starts back up in August that the conversation will be, hey, Ashford's making some throws. Sellers could have some pressure here. What's the situation like behind Sellers?
I think there'll be a little bit of pressure. Robbie Ashford, from my perspective, I thought that he performed well in South Carolina's spring game that they had back on April the 20th. And look, Ashford's got the one thing that LaNorris Sellers does not have, and that is starting experience in the SEC. And while, Ashford certainly could maybe be helping Sellers and maybe guiding him along, I highly doubt that he's going completely out of his way to give the kid basically the best shot to win that starting job. So I think that from that perspective, yeah, there's still going to be some pressure on him. And Robbie Ashford, look, the thing that Auburn fans loved about him when he was in their offense is that Ashford, I think they called him Red Zone Robbie. I mean, he was a guy that made plays when they needed it on certain offensive drives. And last year, one of the things South Carolina struggled the most in was the offensive red zone possessions that they had. Spencer Rattler, obviously not being the greatest athlete in the world running outside the pocket, and Xavier Legette, as great as he was more so a guy that operated in the open field. Not necessarily a guy that's maybe going to catch a bunch of jump balls from 10, 15 yards out on fade routes. So South Carolina needs something in that regard. And again, they've brought in some help at running back and wide receiver in that regard. But Sellers, look, if he struggles in those kind of drills in fall camp and Ashford is excelling, then yeah, I could see this being a potential situation where maybe it does carry over into week 1 for the Gamecocks.
There's more than just a quarterback that goes into winning. Certainly it matters, as we all know. But what does LaNorris Sellers have to work with? You lose a first-round wide receiver from last year's team, and Sellers coming into a situation that looks like what exactly around him?
I think the running back room is really solid. Again, Raheem Rocket Sanders coming in from Arkansas, former first-team All-SEC selection at that position. And so I think that that's obviously a great start right there. Some good backs behind him. Offensive line, probably the biggest question mark on that side of the ball. You got Rashawn Lee that comes back, 5th or 6th year senior at the center spot. So it's great to have a starting veteran at that spot to help guide him in terms of pre-snap communication in these early football games. Wide receiver will also be critical. Bring in a bunch of new faces. Young true freshman, 4-star Mazio Bennett could be a guy that steps up there. A Gage Larvadain comes from the MAC conference over at Miami of Ohio. He could also be a big name there as well. And they also just brought in Dalvin Campbell out of Nevada, their top wide receiver this past year, 6'3", 6'4". And of course, you can't forget about Nick Harbor, the former 5-star that the Oregon Ducks, I know, were heavily in the game for a couple of recruiting cycles ago. Although he's been running track for the past few months, so he's kind of, bring himself back along with the offense as he gets reacclimated with the football program. So he's got weapons around him, but certainly you need things to gel together quickly if you want to see moderate success this next season if you're LaNorris Sellers at quarterback.
How much pressure is Shane Beamer under?
A lot of pressure. Spencer, with the way that the transfer portal is right now in college football, I would say that you got to win this year. If Shane Beamer goes out there and he wins 5 games or less, and especially if it's in blowout fashion, then you're going to see a roster exodus. And then he will probably still get one more year as long as, say, he gets to 5 wins, but it's going to be an uphill battle. You cannot afford to miss out on a bowl game again, and you cannot afford to have a repeat of what happened last year where there were some problems that seemingly could have been prevented if the coaching staff had taken certain measures. So to answer your question, Shane Beamer, he's got a 2-ton weight on his shoulders right now that he's got to lift off if he wants to come back for another season.
Andrew Lyon, Locked On Gamecocks. Thank you, Andrew.
Appreciate it, Spencer.
There are impact starters still available in the transfer portal, and they are going to find homes. That's coming up next.